What does it mean to have the heart of the lion? Well, it commonly refers to a person of exceptional courage and bravery. A lion, commonly referred to as the king of the jungle, often symbolizes a strong ruler. We can see this theme presented in popular culture with figures like Mufasa and Simba from The Lion King, and Aslan from the Chronicles of Narnia. However, it is the queens of the jungle, or the lionesses, that are truly some of the fiercest warriors when it comes to protecting and providing for their children. Young lion cubs will spend most of their childhood away from their fathers, who are oft guarding the pride's territory, meaning that lion cubs rely upon their mother up until they leave the pride, or the family unit. Now, I am no expert on animal psychology, but the lion's family dynamic seems to be heavily built on the idea of trust. The lion cubs trust that the mothers will provide food and nurture them. The lionesses trust that the male lions will provide from invaders. The lions trust that the female lionesses have the home under control. In order to trust fully, one needs to bravely decide to gift that trust to somebody else. There is a surrender that takes place, an admittance that the task cannot be completed without the help of that person. Trust is scary, especially when the well-being of you and your loved ones is at stake. Fortunately, the Bible clearly points us in the direction of where to place our trust. Proverbs 3:5-6. However, I have yet to meet one Christian who claimed that surrendering everything over to the Lord was easy. So how do we place our full trust in the Lord? Well, in this 3-part series with the heart of a lion, we are going to observe the spiritual tendencies of our main character in Daniel chapter 6. We will learn what it takes to pray, trust, and rejoice in a manner that is pleasing and representative of the nature of God. For those who missed my sermon last week, we discussed Daniel chapter 6, verses 1-10. The beginning of Daniel 6 tells the story of how Daniel, a faithful servant of God, faced opposition and was targeted by his colleagues in the new Median government. In this passage, King Darius appointed Daniel as one of the 3 administrators to oversee the kingdom. Due to Daniel's exceptional qualities, the king planned to set over him the entire kingdom. This promotion provoked jealousy and resentment among the other officials. Recognizing Daniel's unwavering commitment to his faith, these officials devised a scheme to trap him. They convinced King Darius to issue a decree forbidding anyone from praying to any god or man for 30 days, except for the king himself. Violators of this decree were to be thrown into a den of lions. Despite the decree, Daniel continued his routine of praying to God, fully aware of the consequences. In just one verse, Daniel 6:10, we learned last week how to pray with the heart of a lion. Daniel prayed with petition, learning about the decree. He does not go upstairs to recite some random prayer. He is not fulfilling some cultural or familial expectation. He is praying to God to protect him from danger and persecution. Instead of trying to maneuver some secret plan or scheme to get around the situation, he recognizes that God is in complete and full control of the situation and immediately surrenders all control over to him. Daniel prays with intention and submission. Daniel intentionally seeks out a quiet space where he can spend time with the Lord in private. He removes himself from distraction and puts himself in a physical position that helps him feel the presence of the Lord. Daniel prays with regularity. We read that during the period of this decree, 3 times a day Daniel prayed, giving thanks to his God. Daniel didn't just pray at church on Sundays or the Sabbath and forget about him the rest of the week. He steadily maintained a daily relationship with God. Lastly, we saw Daniel pray with thanksgiving. Daniel recognizes that time and time again God has saved him, blessed him, protected him, and continues to thank him for all that he has done and all that he will continue to do. Now that Daniel has prayed about the situation, It is now time for him to trust that God will come through. Let's see what happens next. Daniel 6:10 through 17. The word of the Lord. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. These men went as a group and found Daniel praying, asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about the royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human besides you, your majesty, will be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. They then said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or the decree in which you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel down and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and the rings of his nobles, so that the situation in Daniel's may not be changed. So here we are. Daniel is in the den of lions, the famous den of lions. Now, many of you know how this story is going to end, but that'll be for next week. It's hard for me in Redding, Connecticut, living in such an established, safe place, to imagine what Daniel was going through in that moment, looking death squarely in the face. Of course, I've been in a few situations where I've dabbled with life or death, but never in a situation where my death seemed imminent without some sort of divine intervention coming through. So instead of trying to relate to something I could never relate to, I tried to think of someone that had. Being the 4th of July this past Tuesday, I went to look at the testimony of the brave soldiers and veterans of our nation's military. After all, it's their service and dedication to the country that keeps me away from situations like Daniel's. I stumbled upon World War II story titled When a Prayer Saved Him. The story is written from the perspective of an unnamed 24-year-old soldier, a member of the U.S. Army's 35th Infantry Division, 137th Company 1. To me, this story provides a perfect demonstration of what happens when someone places complete and full trust in God in a dire situation. Now, the story's a little bit on the longer side, so bear with me. The story begins. Along with several other companies of American troops, we were making our way through the dense woods in the German Rhineland. Our objective was to reach and take the town of Ossenburg, where the factory was producing products that were being used for the war. For hours we had pressed through an unrelenting thicket. Shortly after the midday, word was passed that there was a clearing ahead. At last we thought going would be easier. But then we approached a large stone house, behind which huddled a handful of wounded, bleeding soldiers who had tried to cross the clearing and failed. Before us stretched 200 yards of open ground, bordered on the far side by more than thick woods. As the first of us appeared on the edge of the clearing, there was an angry rat-tat-tat, and a ferocious volley of bullets sent soil spinning as far as we could see. 3 nests of German machine guns, spaced 50 yards apart and protected by the crest of a small hill to the left. We were firing at the field. As we got our bearings, it was determined that the machine guns were so well placed that our weapons could not reach them. To cross that field meant suicide. Yet we had no choice. The Germans had blockaded every other route into town. In order to move on and secure victory, we had to move forward. I slumped against the tree, appalled at the grim situation. I thought of a home, my wife, and my 5-month-old son. I kissed them goodbye just after he was born. I thought I might never see my family again, and the possibility was overwhelming. I dropped to my knees. God, I pleaded desperately, you gotta do something. Please do something. Moments later, the order was given to advance. Grasping my N1 rifle, I got to my feet and started forward. After the edge of the clearing, I took a deep breath. But just before I stepped out from cover, I glanced to the left. I stopped and stared in amazement. A white cloud, a long, fluffy white cloud, had appeared out of nowhere. It dropped from over the trees and covered the area. The Germans' line of fire was obscured by a thick, foggy mist. All of us bolted into the clearing and raced for our lives. The only sounds were of combat boots thudding against the soft earth as men dashed into the clearing. Scrambling to reach safety on the other side of the mist lifted. With each step into the woods, opposite came closer and closer. I was almost across, my pulse pounding in my ears. I lunged into the thicket and threw myself behind a tree. I turned and watched as the other soldiers followed me, dove frantically into the woods, some carrying and dragging the wounded. This has got to be God's doing, I thought. I'm going to see what happens now. The instant the last man reached safety, the cloud vanished. That day again was clear and bright. I can't believe this. The enemy, apparently thinking we were still pinned down behind the stone house on the other side, must have radioed the artillery. Minutes later, the building was blown to bits. But our company was safe, and we quickly moved on. We reached Ossenburg and went on to secure more areas for the Allies. But the image of that cloud was never far from my mind. I had never seen the sort of smoke screens that were sometimes set off to obscure troop activity in such a situation. That cloud had been different. It had appeared out of nowhere and saved our lives. 2 weeks later, as we went into eastern Germany, a letter arrived from my mother back in Dallas. I tore open the envelope eagerly. The letter contained words that sent a shiver down my spine. "You remember Mrs. Tankersley from our church?" Mother wrote. "Who could forget her?" I smiled. Everyone called Mrs. Tankersley the prayer warrior. Frankly, I sometimes thought she carried it a bit too far. "Well," continued my mother, "Mrs. Tankersley telephoned me one morning from the defense plant where she worked. She said that the Lord had awakened her the night before at 1 o'clock and told her, 'Spencer is in serious trouble. Get up now and pray for him.' My mother went on to explain that Mrs. Tankersley has interceded for me in the prayer until 6 o'clock in the morning, where she had to go to her job. She told me that the last thing she prayed before getting on her knees was, here I paused to catch my breath, 'Lord, whatever danger he is in, just cover him with the cloud.' I sat there for a long time, holding the letter in my trembling hands. My mind raced, quickly calculating. Yes, the hours Mrs. Tankersley was praying would have indeed corresponded to the time we were approaching the clearing. And 6 a.m., with a 7-hour time difference, her prayer for a cloud would have been uttered at 1 o'clock, just the time Company 1 was getting ready to make its daring dash. From that moment on, I intensified my prayer life. For the past 52 years, I've gotten up early every morning to pray for others. I'm convinced that there is no substitute for the power of prayer and its ability to comfort and sustain others, even those facing the valley of the shadow of death. My friends, I know that right now we aren't dodging bullets, saving the world from evil dictators. But life is scary, and it's okay to admit that. Proverbs 3:5-6 commands us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." Now, that sounds easy, but it's not. Not even a little bit. If I'm having money problems, you may ask, how is God supposed to fix that? He's not a bank. If I'm having marital issues, how is God supposed to fix that? Does he have a clinic on Main Street somewhere? If I need an emergency surgery for something, what does that have to do with the decision? What does God have to do with that? He's not the one at the operating table. I control my money. I control my relationships. I control my health decisions. Well, I guess I would say that you are partially correct. God has keyword given you control over some of these specific things. In fact, God gives you control over many aspects of your daily life. It's called free will, and it's one of the most important aspects of our faith. If we didn't have free will, our choices would be made for us. But because of free will, we get to call the shots. While many in the country reject the idea of America being a Christian nation, it's impossible to ignore that the principle of free will gives us freedom as stated in the Declaration of Independence, written 247 years ago, which states that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there is a catch. There's always a catch. It is not us who decides if we live or die, is it? Or if we exist or don't exist, or if we are born into a family that cares about us, or lives in a country with freedom or not, or if we're even happy. The authors of the Declaration state that these things aren't up to us. They are decided by our Creator. Free will is great, and freedom is awesome, but complete free will with complete freedom is just anarchy. So, if we recognize that we ultimately need to place our full trust in something to give us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we should probably submit to the Creator. And contrary to belief, it's not politicians or social movements or a new higher paying job that's going to help you here. Not at all. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is achieved by placing your faith in the one that decides these things. It involves trusting that it's the Lord who makes you truly alive through Christ Jesus. It involves trusting that it's the Lord that makes you truly free through Christ Jesus. It involves trusting that it's the Lord who makes you truly happy through Christ Jesus. Not a politician, not your family, not your friends, but Jesus. Trust in Jesus. So today, I would like you to meditate and pray on Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. I want you to ask yourself a simple question. Do you trust God with everything? And then when you answer no to this question, I want you to write down what exactly it is that you are having such a hard time trusting God with. Is it your money? Marriage? Life decisions? All the above? And lastly, in accordance with your free will, make the decision whether you wish to keep struggling with these things or whether you want to place your full trust in the good Father who in time makes your path straight.
Friends, I want to thank you for watching this full sermon today, and I'd also like to invite you to a Sunday worship service at 9:30 at Danbury Church of Christ. Following our 9:30 Sunday worship service, we will be holding Bible classes for all ages. We hope to see you there.